Hey everyone, I got a question earlier this week from a student who was watching the hair tutorial for painting hair in Photoshop. For those of you who don't know, it's this one, this video where you do this in GIMP. The problem was basically because not many people already know Photoshop, I guess. Uh, it wasn't clear how to translate the GIMP tutorial into Photoshop too well, because the brushes palette I guess is a little bit different in Photoshop versus in GIMP. So I was going to show real quick just how to sort of fix that all up. The first thing I should show is you can create your own brushes in Photoshop, which is kind of neat. You start off with an image of whatever size, which is, you don't actually have to do this as its own image, but it can be easier to keep it self-contained or whatever. But you can actually create your own brushes in any shape you want, including with photos and all that kind of thing. So I'm going to show really quickly how to do this. If it's not already clear, your paintbrush is here. You pick the sizes and shapes here, and you can change the size. I'm just going to leave that on 3 for now. Opacity and flow is like, I'll go into that later, but just opacity on full. If you want to create like a hair painting brush, like what Simon's got in the video, you can just put a few dots here and there, and then with whatever image you've got on screen, you can convert this into a brush where anything that's white will be nothing is brushed out, and anything that's dark that's actually creating paint strokes, which is a little bit unintuitive if you're used to opacity maps. But that's how Photoshop is doing it for brushes. You go edit, define brush preset. Okay, so edit menu. Oh, by the way, my Photoshop version is slightly different. It's like 2 versions older than you guys' that you're using for school. So some of the buttons will be really slightly different, but pretty much everything is still in the same place. You might want to name it something like Hayer. And now I've got that as a brush, like straight up. Okay, so as you can see, it's just kind of, you can't use that to create this, obviously. So I think a lot of people have already figured out how to create the actual shape out of the brush to do what they need to do there, but a lot of people probably don't know how to get past this point. So to edit your actual brush that you've got set up, you go Window, Brushes. I think for some it might be under Panels or something. It depends which version you're using, but in this here, just find the brushes, roll out, and sometimes it's open here anyway. Like sometimes it'll be over on one of these little, like, you got masks and all that there, that you've got this as well, that opens it up. Sometimes you have it over on the right there. Anyway, there's so many settings in here, you can do crazy stuff with it, and I'll do more tutorials on custom brushes, but this should get you just through the hair thing. You got master diameter, which is the actual size of the brush, right? So you can scale that graphic you made up and down. The first really important one is under brush tip shape. See spacing. You can make that really high, or as we want it for hair, to make a continuous strand out of these little dots, we want it to be on as low as humanly possible. Okay, so it keeps dragging one line out, sort of thing. So now we can draw these lines, right? But the other thing that you've got to look for is, you can see how this sort of fades out towards the end here. You can do that in Photoshop as well, of course. It's under Other Dynamics, okay? In the brush panel, Other Dynamics. Then you've got Opacity Jitter. Now, for those who don't know exactly what brush opacity is, it is okay. I'm drawing this right. Oh, sorry, I turned it on. So turn that off in the brush if you turned it on already. But to just show you what opacity is, that's 100% opacity, so it's just completely black. If you set this to 50, it's half as opaque as before, so it's slightly transparent, right? So you can keep drawing over it and it will eventually get to black. It just makes it's like you've watered it down, sort of, and you're going to have to keep scribbling over and over and over, and you can probably see how that's actually pretty useful for doing painting and stuff already. Anyway, other dynamics. In opacity jitter, you don't want it to jitter, because what that's going to do is jitter any setting in here that says jitter. It will actually just randomize it, and you can see along here it's just randomized the opacity of each print of this little dot pattern. So set that to 0, set flow to 0. You probably don't want flow control on opacity jitter. If you set this to, there's all these different ones. You can set it to pen pressure, which is probably the best if you've got a Wacom stylus. If you set that to pen pressure, the harder you push on your Wacom tablet or whatever stylus, the more opaque it will be. And if you loosen off the pressure, it will be lighter, which is really, really handy for painting especially. And you can set a lot of other things to the Wacom pressure as well. But if you set this to fade, it will just fade out over this many pixels, which is, in Simon's video, you can see, where is it? I think it's whatever one of these was, fade length. Alright, that's exactly what, the same thing, that's this, when you've got fade on in here, okay? So I've set that to 500, you can set it to whatever you want, but now, as I pull, I want this on 100, otherwise it will start at 19% opacity, but now it will fade out, okay? So I can start drawing hair strands and whatever, so however many I need to do, and then you can get your lighter color and do some of these over the top. Apart from that, it's pretty straightforward. Like, you just color pick and pick the right things. But something else I wanted to go into really quickly, as you can see here, the hair strands aren't particularly smooth because these are done with the mouse. If you've got a tablet, this is no problem. You can just just the natural motion of your hand will smooth it out. But if you don't have one and you want to get a really smooth line, this is going to be quite time consuming if you want to do it this way, but it's an option. You can draw a path, which is with a pen tool here. You can draw a path, right? And if you haven't used a pen tool before, you can draw point to point, and it's kind of like splines in 3ds Max. In fact, it's pretty much exactly like that. So you can just draw a curve like this, right? And then with your brush, whatever brush you've got selected, if you go into paths over here, it's on the layers palette usually, but if it's not there, it's probably under in Windows somewhere to turn it on. Okay, but you've got a list of all the paths that you've got on the screen here. Now, we've only got one, so it's this one. And when you've got a path, you can right click and go stroke path, right? And a dialog will pop up, which was on my other monitor. But yeah, you can pick any of these, but brush is what we're going to do it with because we've got a brush selected. I go OK, and you can see that if we get rid of that path, it's completely mathematically perfectly curved. So there's no jitteriness to it. Whereas if we try to recreate that by hand, you can see that it's a little bit wobbly because we're using a mouse and blah blah blah. Again, if you've got a stylus, this isn't really a problem. But if you really need a few strands, a few brush strokes that are just perfect, like perfectly curved, to not look like this at all, because I mean this looks a little bit sort of like wiry hair or messy hair or whatever. So you can use pen strokes if you want to. Again, that's under this icon. Double check you haven't got any of these wacky things in selected, just regular pen tool. And you can do whatever shape you want, and then under paths, stroke path, okay, and you've got whatever brush you're using is along that path. Just to demonstrate that it works with any brush at all and any shape, I will pick a different brush in here somewhere. I'll pick one of my custom brushes, which is something I'll do another tutorial on as well, because custom brushes are wicked sick. Just made a new layer so I can have it separately. We've got work path there, stroke path, okie dokie, delete, and now it just looks like a line of chunks of grunge and scratchiness. So you can do that with any brush at all, and it will align it perfectly to the the mathematically drawn out curve, which is always smooth and proper, basically. So you don't have any human jitteriness in drawing with that. Stroke path again, works with just regular old, works with all that stuff. And of course I'm using grey, so it looks a little bit semi-transparent at the moment, but you get the idea. And hopefully that's sort of enough to get you started in terms of the character hair stuff. By the way, I've made all those edits to that brush, but now if I pick it again from this menu, it's going to be just as I created it with the defined pattern thing. So I'm just going to quickly change it up again. Shape dynamics, or not shape dynamics, tip shape. Set the spacing to 0. Other dynamics on, fade on 500. Okay, and then we can just go. I can save it as a new brush or whatever. If sorry, just to show you that a little bit more slowly. You got your brushes, drop down, click this little thing, save that as a new thing. Have, I don't know, whatever. Work. Okay, so now that's saved there as a preset. So the old one is the scattery one, and the new one is just proper good thing. You can just keep going back to any time, and of course set to a proper color that you want to actually use. And yeah, as usual, you can change all those settings. And I encourage you to go through all of these and have a look at them. I'll do videos doing a few of the really important ones, but try all of them and mess around with them and see what you can come up with, because you can do really cool stuff with custom brushes. Anyway, that's about it for that. I hope it's helpful. See you.